Fight!
I really like controllers, and I'm always looking for new and interesting controllers to talk about because it's kind of the part of playing games that you don't really think about all that often. And while the NES controller is iconic and timeless and kind of the default when you think about video game controller, it hasn't really aged as well in the past 30 years now that controller technology has advanced so much. But I was contacted by a group called Retro Fighters who were looking to modernize the NES controller, and they sent me their Jab GamePad to review. So let's talk about it. So in the interest of full disclosure, I was sent a free controller to review from Retro Fighters. I was not compensated in any way other than getting the review copy of the controller. So with that out of the way, let's talk about the Jab GamePad. The Jab GamePad is a really nice looking controller emulating the color scheme of the NES very well. It feels really nice to hold and incorporates a lot of modern sensibilities that are very welcome on an NES controller. It works with the actual NES as well as any aftermarket consoles that are compatible with NES controllers and the PC and Mac via USB. The first thing you'll notice about the Jab GamePad is the build quality. This is a nicely built, solid controller that doesn't feel cheap at all. The buttons all feel great and aren't made with any kind of cheap plastic. Even the box it comes in is extremely high quality, and you even get a keychain of Retro Fighters' mascot. The controller sports the traditional D-pad, A and B, and start and select buttons, as well as rapid fire options. It also has 2 bumpers, 2 triggers, and 2 analog sticks. That might seem like overkill for an NES controller, but since this can also function as a PC controller, the extra buttons do come in handy. The shoulder buttons also work with NES games too, as alternate ways to push A and B. I've spent the week playing a lot of games on my NES, Retron 5, and on an emulator, and I'm happy to say that the Jab GamePad works great with all 3. No matter which system I played on, there was 0 input lag, and the controller was super comfortable. The analog stick, which seems kinda silly for an NES controller, actually works really well with games that support movement in any direction. Using it in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2 the arcade game made it feel a lot more like, well, an arcade game. Top-down games like Jurassic Park also benefited from the more precise control and made lining up shots a lot easier. The triggers and bumpers aren't as useful, but they're fun to play around with in games like Punch-Out! The triggers have a nice amount of give to them and are nice and cushiony. My only complaint with them is that they're set a little too high, and I noticed that if I wasn't using them, I tended to keep my index fingers raised off of them, which did get a little uncomfortable after a while. The A and B buttons are set in a more natural position than they are on an NES controller, which makes hitting them both together a lot easier. They aren't really concave, but they still feel really good and don't hurt your thumb after extended use. My biggest complaint is the D-pad. It hits the diagonals too easily, which really throws off control in games where you're rocking your thumb from one side to the other. In Mega Man, I kept sliding when I didn't mean to, and in Contra, when trying to duck and shoot, I kept walking when I was still holding down. The weirdest issue that I can't explain is in Super Mario Bros. 3, no matter what, when holding down to slide, I always took damage when I hit an enemy. I even had my wife check to make sure it wasn't just me, and it happened to her too. The controller is able to be updated through firmware updates, so hopefully that's something that can be fixed. If it is, I'll add an annotation to the video saying so. At the time of review, there were no firmware updates available on Retro Fighters' website. The Jab GamePad retails for $44.99, and while it's not the total replacement for the NES controller I was hoping for, it does still have a lot going for it, and it's absolutely going to be my go-to controller in games that benefit from that analog stick. The only thing really holding it back is the D-pad, and if they ever manage to fix the issue, I'll be using the controller a lot more. The comfortable grips, button layout, and turbo functions are just fantastic. Right now, it's more of a situational replacement, and if you have games that will benefit from the analog stick, you definitely want one. Well, that's all I got for today, so until next time, remember, love games, love yourselves, and love each other.